So you might know Lenovo for their laptops and their hardware and devices that run Windows and Android, but what about their peripherals? Well, right now you're looking at the Lenovo Essential FHD webcam. We're going to take a look at that, some of the things that you can do to optimize it in settings, all of its specs, and then what it looks like by default. So let's go. Okay, so this is the Lenovo Essential FHD webcam. It's a 2 megapixel webcam. It's going right now for $29.88 on Amazon. It's a 1080p webcam that's capable of lower resolutions. One of the nice things with this webcam is it's also capable of 95 degrees field of view, which has some other benefits that I'll talk about in a minute. Now, this camera has its own physical privacy shutter that you can slide left to right to cover up the camera. It's also got a fixed mount USB-A 1.8 meter or 6 foot long cable, and it's a pivotable mount in terms of how it mounts to your monitor, and it also supports quarter 20, so a lot of options there in terms of the Essential webcam. One thing to note here is that there is no software to control the camera settings, so you have to use the UVC controls that are either inside of OBS, or you can also access them via apps like Microsoft Teams. So I'll go through both the different tabs because there are settings that you can set in the Video Proc Amp tab. There's a lot more you can do there, in fact. So first, the brightness I set to -1. I kept the defaults for contrast and hue and saturation. Then, because there was a bit of noise in the background, I took the sharpness down to 4 from its default, but I kept the auto white balance on. Now, if I move to the camera control tab, one thing I did notice was that it was a bit overexposed kind of by default. My forehead especially was a bit bright with normal lighting. So I did have to turn down my key light just a couple of clicks out of 10. I went, I think, down to 8. And also I disabled the auto exposure and I set it down to -5. So that helped it, because what it was doing was actually exposure hunting. You would see sometimes it would go to overexpose, and then it would be the right color, and then back. So by turning off the auto exposure, that corrected all of that. Now, one other advantage of the 95 degree field of view is with the microphone. So I'm going to go through some of the OBS settings that I set for this camera for the microphone. So first, I turned on the 3-band EQ as a filter for the microphone. I set the high to -5. It was a bit thin on top. I set the mid to -2 and the low to +2. Now, I kept the defaults but added the filters for the compressor, limiter, and noise suppression, and again left those at the defaults. And one thing I did notice was it was kind of hunting a little bit in terms of left and right channel and separation on the stereo microphone, so I set that to mono, and that's what you're hearing right now. Now, I also set a couple of things in terms of OBS for the camera controls, not too much, but I set gamma to -0.3, the contrast to -1.5, and kept the brightness and saturation at their default 0 settings. And then I added a little bit of hue shift to the pink side to make it at 1 positive, so that it gave it a little bit more of the natural colors. So again, this is the tuned setup for the Lenovo Essential FHD webcam. But now let's have a look at what it looks like in the default settings, and also what it sounds like when I turn off all the filters and set everything back to defaults. Alright, so this is the Lenovo Essential FHD webcam with all the defaults. The default camera out of the box in terms of when you plug it right in. Nothing set in the UVC camera controls, nothing set in OBS for the camera, and also the default audio coming out of the webcam. So maybe you can hear the difference between what I just filmed and what this sounds like and what this looks like. So hopefully this is a good guide for that. Okay, so as you saw, the defaults weren't quite as good, in my opinion at least, in terms of the settings that I was able to get to it when I tuned it in terms of exposure, the audio, color balance, all of those things, especially given that I've tested so many different webcams and also full-framed and mirrorless cameras in the setup with the same lighting. So let me know what you think in terms of the Lenovo Essential FHD webcam. I think it's a great value at just under $30 on Amazon right now. Probably the best value, I would say, of all the webcams that I've tested. I think it's probably in part due to Lenovo having the expertise of tuning their cameras and their microphones on their laptops and applying some of that knowledge in terms of applying that to a lower price budget webcam, and the result is actually pretty stellar. So If you got value from this video, be sure to give me a like. If you want to see more reviews like this and also work from home tips, subscribe to my channel. And as always, thank you for watching.